teacher, hello students. Welcome to today's lesson on determination of levels of outputs, prices and employment aggregate supply. In our last lesson, we discussed factors that determine aggregate demand. Let me remind you of the main points of our previous lesson. In the last lesson, we discussed that the determinants of aggregate demand, which are the factors other than the price level that cause the aggregate demand curve to shift either to the right or the left. An increase in aggregate demand is represented by a rightward shift of the aggregate demand curve, while a decrease in aggregate demand is a leftward shift of the curve. We also noted that the determinants of aggregate demand work through the four aggregate expenditure categories. Students, in today's lesson, we will discuss aggregate supply, determinants of aggregate supply, and the determination of equilibrium output and prices by the interaction of aggregate demand and aggregate supply. Students, what do you think is aggregate supply? Define aggregate supply based on your knowledge of aggregate demand. Raise up your hand and tell your classroom teacher what aggregate supply is. I hope you've attempted to define what aggregate supply is. To have a common understanding of the definition, let me give you the answer. Are you ready? Good. Aggregate supply, abbreviated as AS, is defined as the total output that producers in an economy are willing and able to produce and supply to the market over a given period of time at a given price level. Normally, there is a positive relationship between aggregate output, real GDP, supplied and the price level. The positive relationship between the general price level and the aggregate output supplied is represented by an upward sloping aggregate supply AS curve. As shown in the graph, other factors being constant, when the general price level increases, from P0 to P1, the level of real output increases from Q0 to Q1. Students, I hope you are now clear with the definition of aggregate supply and the relationship between aggregate output supplied and the general price. Now, I want you to do the second activity in groups. The question is, explain graphically the increase and decrease in aggregate supply.